Hello, everyone, and welcome to our very last sit and sip of the semester. And we are ending it on a good one. So today we have Melissa Maginnis, which a lot of you might recognize just from either taking class with her, doing research with her, or just heard of her name. So very excited and happy to have Melissa with us today. And so I'm going to have Melissa introduce yourself. And if you also kind of want to talk just a little bit about your career path and really what made you choose more of a career in research than in something else.
Sure. So thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here. And I am an assistant professor in the Department of Molecular and Biomedical Sciences. I have been at the University of Maine since 2014, so it's been about 6 years now, and I've had a really great experience here. And being a virologist, this has been a very interesting time. I'm one of the only virologists in the state of Maine that studies human viruses. So there has been a lot of questions, of course, around COVID-19 and SARS-CoV-2. And I've had the opportunity to step into some different roles in addition to my typical role in the classroom as well as in the research setting in my own laboratory. And so I think the first question is how I ended up in a career in research and teaching. And so I'll just start off by saying that growing up, I grew up in the Philadelphia area, in the Philadelphia suburbs, and in a working class family. And I was the first person in my family to attend college. And my grandfather actually was a polio survivor. And so that was really impactful because I got to see him with really weakened legs, really as he just walked around. Oftentimes he would stumble, and it's because he was infected with poliovirus when he was 21 years old. There was an outbreak in our town, Folsom, Pennsylvania, and there were 8 people that were infected. And he was paralyzed from the neck down, and he was paralyzed and quarantined for about a year. And at that time, my grandmother was actually pregnant with my father and had 2 other young children. So it was a major impact on their life, and he ultimately was able to walk again, but he was weakened from the disease. And so it really fascinated me to know that a virus could wreak such havoc on the body, and that really just intrigued me. And then as I started to think about college, I ultimately went to a liberal arts college called Newman College in Pennsylvania, and I decided to study biological sciences because I was fascinated with the human body. And at the time, I actually wanted to be a physical therapist. That's what I thought I wanted to do. And that probably was
Me
because
too.
really? See, we're recovered physical therapists.
Clearly
At
that
the
didn't
time
happen.
I was interested in sports, and I played sports in high school. And I think it was just something that was familiar to me. And so that was my career path, I thought. And then when I was in college, I had the opportunity to go to Vanderbilt for a summer research internship and work in a laboratory. And I did some molecular biology and cell biology there. And I really loved the environment, and I really enjoyed the lab work. And so I applied to graduate school at Vanderbilt. I went there and I earned my PhD in microbiology and immunology. And there is where I started actually working on viruses. And I actually studied reovirus, which is a virus that most people have never heard of, but it's a really interesting model virus to study molecular virology and viral pathogenesis. And I worked in Dr. Terry Dermody's lab there. And then after that, I went to Brown University for a postdoctoral research fellowship. And I worked in Dr. Walter Atwood's laboratory. And I studied the human JC polyomavirus. And I was there for 7 years. And then after that, I moved on to my own independent laboratory at the University of Maine. So that's sort of my career trajectory. I was always interested in viruses, and then ultimately really was fascinated by the human body and biology, and then thinking I wanted to go into physical therapy. And I think I had an advisor in undergrad that once said, you know, that's a really saturated field, and I think that maybe you should consider some other career options. And so I did have that in the back of my mind, and I think at the time it was a saturated field. And I don't know what my life would be like. I guess it would be quite different if I had gone into physical therapy. But ultimately, I loved working in the laboratory. I loved teaching. I love doing research. And we get to be in the question asking business. And we get to ask, how viruses infect cells and how they ultimately cause disease. And I think that it's really fun to be able to do this kind of work and then teach students about what we're doing. And honestly, sometimes I think about this job and I can't believe that it's actually a real job, that we get to just ask questions about viruses and do cool experiments and then talk about our findings. So I feel really fortunate.
That's awesome. And I think it's so important for students to realize the career path that you can go into in research, and that you can still be in the healthcare field or in the medical field and do research. Because I hear so many students are like, I want to cure this, I want to cure that. And it's like, well, that's not necessarily going to happen if you're going to be a family physician. You're not doing, like, that's not the same thing. And so having them realize that you can do that, but it's in a very different lens than they may be realizing, and that it can be just as rewarding. You're just helping people in a different way. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and actually, oftentimes students, I think, don't understand the full capacity of opportunities in the field of biomedical sciences or research in general. And they're not really sure what they could do with their degree once they finish. And there are lots of different opportunities. So you can work in a research lab, like an academic lab. You could work at a research institute, like the Jackson Laboratory, doing bench research. In addition, you could work at the CDC and do more of governmental-based research. You could also, once you go to graduate school and you've earned a master's or a PhD, then you can move into lots of different roles. I have friends that are patent lawyers that have gone through PhD programs and then also gone to law school to become a patent lawyer. I have friends with PhDs that work in patent law offices. I also have a lot of colleagues that work for the Department of Defense, that work for the CDC, people that work in the private sector, like pharma companies, biotech companies. So those kinds of options also exist. People that do scientific consulting, so sort of interfacing between science and business. So there are many different careers in science, and I think that you kind of have to explore where you would like to end up within the field of science, because every aspect of the scientific community is so important. Also, like science communication, people that work for scientific journals or doing science and medical writing, every single career is fulfilling, and you sort of have to think about what it is about science that you really like. Do you love to be at the bench and do research and think about experiments and follow your curiosity, or do you love to communicate the science and write about it and give presentations? And I think that as students go through the programs in school, and also as they sort of go on and explore in various careers once they graduate, they start to understand what it is about science that they really love, and then they can follow that career path.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So, hot topic, COVID-19.
Yeah.
On everybody's minds right now. So I know that you and Christy Townsend are actually doing some, there's work that you're doing with some students, from what I saw in an article that was published, that you are contributing to the Bangor public health research. Do you want to talk a little bit about, or I'm sure I just totally said that wrong, but do you want to talk a little bit about that research that you're doing? Because it sounds fascinating.
Yeah, sure. So we're doing a little bit more than that too. So I'll tell you about the various roles that we've been playing in the COVID-19 crisis. So of course, our laboratories have shut down. So right around the time that courses started moving online, also there was a closure of the UMaine research facility. So our laboratories have shut down. So we're sort of mentoring our students from home. Everyone's working remotely to the extent possible. And so while we're teaching online, and we're also doing research remotely, so there is actually some research that we can be doing in terms of bioinformatics and writing and all of that kind of stuff. So in addition to that, Christy Townsend received a request from Bangor Public Health to provide some updates on the science, because as you know, the information is just moving so rapidly, and there's so much to take in. And of course, for every argument that you read, or every position, there's always a counter argument, counter position. And so what we're doing is using our analytical, critical thinking skills to really weed through all of that research and then boil it down and disseminate those findings to the public through Bangor Public Health, so that we can help to inform some of their decisions. And we have involved our students in that work too. So we have graduate students and undergraduate students from our lab that are working on various topics. And so we might assign students with a particular topic, like what should be a protocol for going to the store? How do you go to the store during the COVID-19 pandemic? And so the students will do research, they'll look into CDC guidance, and they'll look into other reputable sources, and then they'll write up a sort of guideline for how to do that. And one of my students, Colleen Mayberry, actually made an infographic that we just posted on the Bangor Public Health website that can be downloaded and used. And all of this has been also cross-listed on the UMaine website as well. So people can go and look at the various topics that we've covered, and they could read more about it. In addition to that, Christy and I were both appointed to a scientific advisory board, and this was put together by President Freeney Mundy and also the Chancellor of the UMaine System, Daniel Malloy. And the role in the scientific advisory board is to get even deeper into the literature and also to keep following all of the updates that are coming out surrounding COVID-19. And we are looking into various topics with the help of other team members. So Robert Wheeler and Caitlin Howell are also on this team, in addition Sarah Houston from the University of Southern Maine. And so we're putting together our expertise so that we can provide guidance in help people that are making the decisions about the campus and the closure of the campus and whether the campus might be able to reopen and what that might look like. So we're actually providing the scientific guidance behind that. So that's what we have been spending a lot of our time doing, is really trying to understand where are we on vaccine development for SARS-CoV-2 and on treatments. What does the diagnostic testing look like? Could we expand diagnostic testing in the state of Maine? What about serology and immunity testing? And then transmission and prevalence, and how that pertains really to the environment, but also how that pertains to some of our social interactions and social distancing, contact tracing. So those are the topics that we've been covering, and then we've been briefing President Freeney Mundy as well as the UMaine System Chancellor Malloy. And we've been working together also very closely with the Safe Planning team. There's an entire team, and actually there are many different teams across campuses that are working on these decisions. And so we have been interfacing with those groups to help inform them.
So clearly you've been busy.
We've been busy.
But that's so cool. I mean, that's just so cool to know that the university, our professors that, our students have been just, going to class with, are having such a huge impact on what is happening just in our area and learning and just all of that. And I think that's so cool that students have the opportunity to be a part of that. And I think that's so cool that they are creating different things to help not only their fellow students and the campus, but also just the community in general. It's such a great learning experience. So even though this whole thing is crazy and chaotic, there's some positives that are coming out of this for students, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that there have been a lot of learning opportunities for me during this, because I am usually not called on to be on the news, and I have been on the news now 3 times. I've been in the Bangor Daily News, and then I was asked to do a podcast on the main question. And so I did a podcast recently on why viruses go viral. So there has been a lot of press opportunities for me to talk about viruses in general. And so I think that it's a great opportunity to educate people on infectious diseases and specifically viruses. And maybe in the past, people didn't give as much attention to microbes and maybe even biomedical sciences and human health as before. And now I think that they're going to maybe shift their thinking and maybe become more curious about it and maybe want to learn about these topics. So that's been another silver lining to all of this.
Absolutely. And I think that it also, just from a career counselor standpoint, being able to have the skill set to explain what you do to the general public is a really good skill to have, because I'm just going to pretend like I know all those words that you're saying and all of those things that you're doing. And that sounds super cool and that's awesome. But I know sometimes that's why, I know everyone encourages students to, if they are going to do research, present it at the symposium, get familiar with, doing research, but then presenting that research so that you are familiar with how to alternate between your science professor to me, where I'm like, that's cool. That sounds really cool.
You're right. Yeah, it's so important, because what good is the science if you can't communicate it effectively? And we have to be able to effectively communicate it to many different groups. And so any opportunity in which students can gain that kind of practice, I encourage them to take it. And that includes both written and oral communication skills.
That's awesome. So that was a good lead in to my next and kind of final question is, what advice would you give to students who are interested in health professions, the medical field, are preparing for that type of career? What advice would you give to them to take advantage of their undergraduate?
Usually I tell them, go meet with Samantha Wheeler.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I love a shout out.
And start planning early. I think that that's so important. So as soon as they know that they want to follow a particular career path, I think they should start planning, and they should think about what kind of experiences are they going to need in order to build up their application to make that application rise to the top. And that's what I tell students all the time. So if you want to go to medical school, a lot of people are going to apply that have really great GPAs, and they're going to have decent MCAT scores, and they're going to have some experience shadowing a physician, and they'll have some research experience. But what makes your application rise to the top? What makes you stand out? And to start thinking about those things early on rather than waiting until it's too late and then say, oh no, I was supposed to get some research experience and now I'm in my senior year, and they're sort of scrambling to do that. So if you can identify what kind of experiences and opportunities you'll need to make your application really strong, think about that early on, and then start building up that resume, start building up that entire application. And I think to think about that with good intention, so that you're doing all of these things with a great thought, and so that you're approaching these experiences to think about, what am I going to get out of this experience, and how can I turn this into an opportunity that will prepare me for my future career? So to think really thoughtfully about how you're spending your time, I think is important. And then to be continually updating that document. So I always tell students they should always have a resume or a CV ready to go, even if you are applying to work in a professor's lab. And maybe it's your first year in college and you've heard that you should get involved in research, so you're looking for a research opportunity. When I tell students, when they send that email to the professor, make sure it is so professional. Dear Professor Maginnis, I am so interested in your research. My name is, and then tell me who you are. Tell me what your place is at the university. What year are you? What are you studying? What are your goals? Why do you want to work in my lab? Show me that you've actually have read my website and you've gone through it a little bit and you actually know a little bit about what I work on, to show me that you are really interested. And make that email so professional, because that is your first impression, your first point of contact. And then sometimes I tell students, if you have a resume, attach it. And if you don't have a resume, this is a good time to make one. So start making that resume or your CV, and then continually update it so that every time you do something, like you have an experience shadowing a physician or you present at the student symposium, make sure that you put those things down on your CV or resume, because as they build up, sometimes we forget about them. And every experience that we have could be really important to that overall application. And so make sure that you're documenting all of those things as you go along, and then have check-ins with people like Samantha Wheeler and people in the health professions and career office, and then also with your advisors and with your peers, and say, you know, these are the things I'm doing to help prepare for medical school or graduate school. Do you think I'm doing the right things? What things might you suggest that I start doing that I'm not doing right now? Would you take a look at my CV and tell me if you think that there are strengths or maybe some opportunities where I could strengthen particular pieces? So think about those as live documents that you continue to update, and think about your college experience as a way to continue to build up that application, so that ultimately at the end, your application is all the way at the top, and that everybody is just dying to get you into their program or into their company or wherever you may be applying.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice. I wish all students would take that advice. This is me calling out to you all. Do not wait till the last minute.
Yes.
It's just such a stressful process that the sooner you can start working on it and do it in chunks versus in one big heap, it's going to make your life. So all you procrastinators out there, this is not the time to do it. But yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. And come to the Career Center virtually. We're here to help you. So those were all the questions that I had for you, and you crushed all of them. Thank you so much. That was extremely helpful. Thank you so much for all the work that you're doing and helping, seeing whether or not we can come back to campus and all of that. And so thank you again. I really do appreciate it. And thank you all for watching the last Sit and Sip session, and have a great, I can't believe the semester's over. Like, I can actually say the semester's over. And so it's just mind-blowing to me. But thank you again, Melissa, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, you too.
Bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye.